everyone, and welcome to Inquirer Live's Gameday Central. I'm Gina Mizell, Sixers beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm joined by my colleague Keith Pompey, who is in Boston for the 76ers opener tonight against the Celtics. Keith, a long offseason is over for us and for the Sixers. What was the vibe like at shoot-around at the arena this morning as the Sixers get ready to start their season officially?
It actually was a great vibe. Tyrese Maxey was making fun of a certain media member for wearing shorts and not having any lotion on his legs. VJ Edgecombe he talked about how he slept 8 hours last night and he slept well. And then you had Jared McCain and Paul George having a left-handed 3-point shooting contest that Jared McCain won. So yeah, the vibe was great. I mean, it didn't seem as if, they're playing the first game. It seemed like they were relaxed, like they were about to head to practice.
All right. Well, make sure you're heading over to inquirer.com/Sixers Game Day to submit your comments and questions and be a part of our conversation throughout the game. All right, let's get into it. I mean, you mentioned felt like a practice, good vibes today, and a fascinating season tonight begins for the Sixers. We all know how last season went, a season with so many preseason expectations, never gets off the ground, primarily because just the injury bug was so vicious. Joel Embiid only played in 19 games. Paul George was hampered throughout much of the season. Tyrese Maxey even missed some time at the end of the year, and it was a disastrous, dreadful, woeful, whatever adjective you want to use. That is what it was for the Sixers. But they have a chance to turn the page tonight. And I think going into this year, there's a lot of confusion, maybe is not the right word, but just a lot of intrigue, and just it feels like it can go a lot of different ways. And the annual GM survey that came out on NBA.com about a week ago indicates that the Sixers are the toughest team to figure out, or the toughest team to predict. Do you agree with that? And just how in general do you feel about going into this season? Because you've covered this team for a long time, and this just feels like a little bit of a wild card.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, a couple of days ago, we had to come out and do our predictions. And, and I told our editor, Deontay Prince, like, dude, no one knows. I don't even think Daryl Morey knows, Nick Nurse knows, Joel Embiid. But all of it is predicated on Joel Embiid, actually. Joel Embiid and Paul George. I feel like the East is so wide open. If Joel Embiid could play at 80% of the player that we know that he can be, and if Paul George can come back and do some of the things that we thought he could do, the Sixers can be a formidable team in the East. I don't know if they're a top 3 team, but I do think that they're a team that will make the playoffs, right? And play well. Now, again, if Joel Embiid, he gets re-injured, or if he struggles moving consistently, if Paul George, what we saw of him last year, is what he's going to be, then I think this team is going to struggle mightily, and there'll be another lottery type team. So, but it's all predicated on Joel and Paul George, what they can do, because I love Tyrese Maxey, but I think he's going to need one of those guys to help him out in order for the Sixers to be a contender. And I want to know how you feel about the matter as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And it's funny because before we went live here, we were talking about just the difference between this year and last year, and how last year there were all these expectations. We were writing stories about the, emergence of signing Paul George and winning free agency and putting this roster together. And then night one, Joel Embiid is hurt, Paul George is hurt, and again, the season just kind of never gets off the ground, and so you never got to see it come to fruition. Where this year, Paul George is still out after having arthroscopic knee surgery in July, but Joel Embiid is on a more positive track. I think maybe ahead, I don't know if the team will say he's ahead of schedule, but I don't know if I thought he would play opening night, or maybe I've just seen enough, and you've seen even more at this point, that I'll believe it when I see it, and I'll believe it when Joel Embiid is actually back on the floor. And in Delaware a couple weeks ago, we saw him play in a scrimmage for the first time. That was our first opportunity to see him do anything resembling live 5-on-5 action. He obviously played in the preseason game last Friday at home, and that was sort of his first appearance in front of a home crowd in a really long time in months, and looked pretty good, all things considered, other than like a little bit of a scare at the end of the game when he took a fall and sort of you saw the knee move awkwardly. But I even think maybe more importantly, the fact that he was then able to participate fully in the next practice, and that his knee did not swell up or tighten up or whatever things they're monitoring just to manage that knee. And I think that kind of aligns too with what we heard on media day too from Joel, as far as he seemed to have I don't know, a lightness to him, or at least like a more understanding mindset as far as how he's just like, okay, we're gonna manage this as best we can, and if there's a setback, we'll handle it and deal with it, and we're gonna try to navigate through this the best we can. And that's obviously easy to say in late September, early October, but the ramp that we always talk about with the health of this team at least seems to be trudging in the right direction. And also for Paul too, he's a little bit behind, but he is now back to practicing as well.
Yeah, you're 100% right with that. And the thing about Joel, the thing that I really want to pay attention to is how he does after several games, right? And now, right now, everything is set up for him to be able to play in at least 3 of the first 5 games, because they play tonight and then they're going to be off for 2 days, right? Then they're going to play on Saturday, but then they have a Monday, Tuesday back-to-back. I wouldn't be shocked if he missed. I mean, of course, he's going to miss one of those games, but I wouldn't be shocked if he maybe missed both of them, right? But even with that, that will enable him to be able to play on Friday, next Friday, against the Boston Celtics at home. But if you remember last year, Joel looked great at times, and then all of a sudden they would play 6 games, and then all of a sudden he would miss the next 9 games. So to me, that's going to be the test when they go on there and they have these long stretches and Joel plays in multiple games, to see how his body responds, right? Right now, everything is set up cool. Joel is like facilitating, getting other people involved, but I just want to see what he looks like once everything gets rolling, because of meet of the schedule, so to speak.
Yeah, and like you said, I don't think anybody truly knows until you try to be in the thick of it, try to do it. And of course, I'm sure there are tinkers to the plan as far as trying to be proactive and taking those games off, like you said, and being strategic about it. There were even practice days where we were told this was a scheduled off day. We knew he was not going to practice that day. We're trying to be deliberate and diligent about making sure he can sustain for as much of an 82 game schedule as possible. But yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how much of that works and how much of it doesn't, and maybe what has to be adjusted along the way, and just sort of how he holds up both physically and mentally. And with Paul George, I think you said it too, like obviously him getting healthy is priority number 1, but we saw last year that even when he was, I don't know if he was ever fully healthy all year, to be honest, but like the healthiest that he just didn't look like the same player. He struggled to get by defenders and like explode to the basket. He was kind of just like a jump shooting guy. Obviously, as a player who's been a great defender throughout his career as well. And so again, without actually seeing him in any scenarios resembling 5-on-5 or live work, what are you most curious to see about him, or what kind of expectations, if any, do you put on him this year?
I mean, like you said, let's see what he can do. See if he can get blow by people. The thing about Paul George, his best games came against the Charlotte Hornets, right? Paul George looked like the Paul George of old. And then you look back at it and you say the Charlotte Hornets were arguably the worst team in the league, right? Even before everybody started tanking, like they were arguably the worst team. And then, other teams just shut people down before them. So they finished with the 3rd worst record or something like that, right? So the thing is, you're right. I want to see if he can implement what he did against more competitive teams. And the biggest thing is he was at his worst when he played with Joel Embiid, right? And that's a problem. So we have to find out, can you guys play well together? Can you play off of them? Because, you're making a lot of money. They brought you out in here, 3 max players. They need Paul George to be productive when he's playing alongside Joel. Another thing is, I think that Paul also has to help himself. He has to become a little bit more aggressive. Like we remember the one game when they went up against the Brooklyn Nets, and I get it. A little while later, it came out that he was getting shot up before the game, but I feel like that news was leaked to us later because he was getting destroyed. I believe Paul George, what he might have scored 1 or 2 points or whatever it was against Brooklyn, and he had an opportunity to take the last second shot and he passed it up to Justin Edwards. So for me, I need to see, hey, can you be more aggressive and can you coexist with Joel Embiid? Because that's going to have to happen out of Paul in order for the 76ers to play as well as they want to.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, going back to last year, this should be an ideal fit. I remember Nick Nurse talking about the 1-3-5, the point guard, wing, small forward, and center with all three of those guys. And that should on paper be a fit, but we just didn't see it enough to really make a judgment. So it will be fascinating to watch all throughout the year. And the one in that scenario is Tyrese Maxey. And it's a big season for him as well, too, because last year, obviously, a ton was on his shoulders, both like physically, mentally, public speaking wise, just everything. When you're the person who, as the season is totally going down the drain, you have to explain loss after loss. You have the ball in your hands. Your efficiency goes down. You're trying to make something happen out of nothing. And you've got teammates rotating in and out. It was kind of the first time, obviously, in his career where he didn't just naturally ascend. He was a first-time All-Star the season before, NBA's most improved player, and then kind of finally took a little bit of a step back. So obviously, he's a guy that's going to work his tail off. He's sort of the engine of this now high-paced offense that they want to run this. And he's talked about setting sort of a cultural standard and all of that. So, what are you most curious to see about his development in now year 6, which is crazy to say for someone like him, but now he's not quite in his prime yet, but starting to get into that meat of his career.
The thing that I'm most curious to see is how he plays off of VJ Edgecombe, right? And I know that Tyrese Maxey is saying that, and everybody's making it seem like this is new with him playing off the ball and being dominant off the ball. But Gina, you remember when James Harden was here, and James Harden was the point guard, and we would see Maxey get out in space and go, right? Yeah. Last year, part of the problem was that the 76ers didn't have anybody who was a legitimate point guard. Like they would have certain people go out there and play it, but Maxey had to be the distributor. And what that did was it made it hard for him because whenever he would turn the corner, teams would collapse on him. But then all of a sudden, when they took him off the ball in certain scenarios, what it would do is when he would go, it was like, do I go with him? Do I stick with the other person? And Maxey would use his speed to get certain places. So now we talk about VJ, and they want VJ to be more of a ball handler. What that's going to do is Maxey is going to be able to use his speed without the ball to get to certain spots. We're going to see VJ feed him, and then Maxey is going to, get easier baskets. I honestly think that, the way that this season is set up for Maxey is that he's probably going to be an all-star. I believe that he's going to be the leading scorer on the team for the second year in a row. And when you look at the pieces that they have, all these guys fit more of his style than they do Paul George and Joel Embiid style. So, I'm looking to see, like you say, Maxey has always ascended. Last year he plateaued a little bit, but I'm looking for him to take another big jump this year, big leap. And I think it's because of the players he has around him, not just VJ, but we're talking about Quentin. Quentin's going to stretch the floor, right? When McCain comes in, I honestly think McCain is going to do a lot of the ball handling too. So I think that Tyrese Maxey is going to ascend, but I really want to see what he does as a 2 guard, because I think that's where he's going to have a lot of success. What about you?
Yeah, no, I agree. This guard group, other than just the injury stuff with the 2 stars or the 2 max players, with Embiid and Paul George, that's what I'm most fascinated to see. Obviously, great reviews out of VJ Edgecombe throughout camp. And we've seen the athleticism, we've seen the defensive ability. Obviously, his shooting is still a work in progress. But the fact that Nick Nurse was asked before the preseason finale, like, is there hesitancy about starting VJ Edgecombe, starting a rookie in game one? And he was like, no, he's shown he's able to do it, I think is a great sign for him. And I think he is further ahead as a ball handler than maybe we would have anticipated at this time of the year, which has been, I think, a big coup for the Sixers. Number one, because Quentin Grimes arrived late because of his contract situation, and obviously the unfortunate, ill-timed second serious injury for Jared McCain with going out with the thumb, because he was being groomed to be the backup point guard before he had his knee surgery last year. So the fact that VJ is ready to go, and does he stay in that starting guard spot the whole season? Who knows? But if he isn't in that spot, it's probably because Jared McCain is back and looks like the same player that he was last year, or Quentin Grimes has reemerged. And obviously we saw what he was able to do, during his post-trade deadline stretch. Some might say it was empty calories because the team was tanking, but still he showed a lot of stuff that maybe he wasn't able to do, or it wasn't able to show at other points in his career. But all four of those guys too are just so fast, so athletic, just have that burst. And I don't know if you felt the same way, but like watching the game on Friday, even without McCain out there, it was just like, wow, okay, yeah, they, when they talked about last year, we need to get younger and more athletic, this is exactly what they meant, because guys can get down the floor, they can push the pace, they can go up to catch lobs. Like it just looked like such a different product compared to last year and even many previous years that with the way this team was constructed.
Yeah, it does. They're a whole lot quicker. And the one thing that I noticed, it's not a knock, and it's just because Joel was coming back. But when they took him out and they had a boner with the outlet passes, they were quicker. You know what I mean? They were going. But the one thing that really intrigues me about the 76ers is how is Quentin Grimes going to be as a sixth man? Like, I honestly think that Quentin Grimes could be one of the league's elite six men, six man coming off the bench. Now, here's the deal with him. I understand it. You want to get paid, right? Typically, you get more money if you're in the starting lineup. And is he a starter on this team? Can he be one? Yes, he can. But I feel like when you have Joel Embiid, you have Paul George, you have Tyrese Maxey, there's not a lot of balls to go around. And I feel like his role would be, okay, Quentin, sit in the corner, be a catch and shoot guy. You're going to stretch the floor. Okay. And then, but if he comes off the bench and they take Maxey out, they take a couple other people out, they're going to rely heavily on him to provide the offense. And what that's going to do is going to be able to showcase some of his athletic ability that people didn't think he had before he came here last year, right? So I'm really intrigued with that one. Another thing that you said about VJ Edgecombe, I kind of like him in the starting lineup just because I feel like him playing with these guys, he can be more of himself. He doesn't have to worry about the pressures of coming off the bench and doing the stuff that they're going to ask from Quentin, right? And I also feel like, and what I mean by that is, okay, young fella, we need you to bring up the ball sometimes. We also need you to defend. And guess what? We're going to give you a couple lobs a game. We need you to be the athletic player, just your role. And what you're going to do is you're going to learn how to play off of other players, right? So when I asked him a couple weeks ago, do you look at this as a blessing? Because let's just say if he was drafted by New Orleans, or if he was drafted by, Charlotte or another team that was struggling, it would be one of those things where he will be looked upon as the savior if he has other young guys on the team. Well, right now, you got Paul George, you have Joel Embiid, you have Kyle Lowry. We're talking about three guys who are probably going to be Hall of Famers, right? And then you also have Tyrese Maxey, who's a 6-year veteran and a guy we don't know what his future entails, but at the same time, we know he's a great person and he looks out for you. So I feel like this is a perfect situation for VJ to learn. And then in a couple years, he's going to be able to take off and be that running mate that Tyrese Maxey needs. Same with Jared McCain.
Yeah. Well, and also a thing too, if you keep VJ in the starting lineup, that sort of eliminates the concerns about having McCain and Maxey in the same backcourt from a defensive
True.
perspective too. So
Exactly.
no,
Great
that
point. Great point.
just the able to sort of mix and match. And Nick Nurse has talked about maybe eventually starting 3 guards or even experimenting with 4 guard lineups. Like, I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff, which again, when you compare that to last year when we're saying, oh, Tyrese Maxey was the only capable ball handler out there. Now you've got a ton of stuff to work with. And so, like I said, besides just the obvious, how do Joel and Paul George come back from last season? These guards, I think, are going to be really fun to watch and are going to at least make this team, I think, more entertaining than they were last year, which is a nice stepping stone compared to what everybody, including ourselves, had to watch last year. So let's move on to maybe some under the radar players or some breakout player type candidates after watching the preseason, after watching practices, just talking to people. When you look at the rest of this roster, who's somebody that's maybe either flying under the radar or that fans that are now just kind of coming up for air to be like, all right, let's watch this team tonight and going on through the season? Who is somebody that they should watch out for that you think is going to have an impact on this team that maybe wasn't expected?
You know, the biggest person for me is Dominic Barlow, right? I mean, you look at him and, you know, it's one of those things. And when he came here, he came on a 2-way. He's still on a 2-way. The same with Jabari Walker. But Jabari, to me, was the guy that I thought was like, okay, what they're going to do is they're going to do a Justin Edwards. Like, you're going to be on a 2-way, and then in January or February, we're going to convert that contract so you can get a standard deal. I always thought it was going to be Jabari. And then all of a sudden, you know, you start seeing Dom Barlow and you start seeing how he's able to play off of star players, right? You know, he's doing everything that they need him to do. You need rebounding and you need offensive boards. And when you look at it, he'll have 8 rebounds in one game, but 6 of them are on the offensive end, right? Put back dunks. Oh, and the thing is, he's more athletic than you think. Like, he can get out there and guard, he can run, he can do a lot of different things. So when I looked at him, I saw that he was a 2-way player at his previous stops. You know, he spent 2 years with the Spurs, and then he spent last season with the Atlanta Hawks. Now, he always ended up getting his contracts converted, but at the same time, he spent a lot of time in the G League. But I look at him and I think that, you know, this guy can become a fan favorite. Now, as a guy that a long time ago, and I know you don't remember him, but when you look at him in the lineup, there's a guy that used to play for the Sixers named Mark Ivoroni, right? Mark Ivoroni was the starting power forward over Bobby Jones, who was a Hall of Famer. But what Mark Ivoroni did is he was out there because guess what? They already had scorers. They already had all these other athletic players. You needed a guy who was going to defend and rebound. And I feel like that's what Dom Barlow is going to do for the Sixers. He's going to be their Mark Ivoroni on the nights that he starts or when he even comes in off the bench. And that's going to free other guys up to do other things. So he has been my guy under the radar, or my guy who's going to be a surprise. Who's your surprise player?
Yeah, I agree with that. First of all, great pick as a guy who wasn't even on the summer league team until like 2-3 games into it. You know, joined the team in Vegas late and has really carved out a nice role for himself. I'll go with Adem Bona, and who maybe is not quite as under the radar since he obviously played a ton last year down the stretch, but really took advantage of that time, which is maybe one silver lining of how poorly the season went last year, is it gave a chance for someone like him, even a Justin Edwards, to sort of develop and grow and get that game experience. But I mean, is he going to start tonight? Are they going to do the double big thing? Like, how often are they going to do that? And that's a lineup they've experimented with over the last few weeks. And Adem has talked about, you know, ever since he got drafted here, like wanting to play alongside Joel. And again, it sort of changes a little bit of things for Joel, where he can play a little bit more on the perimeter. Tyrese Maxey was joking that, oh, Joel, you're a stretch 4 now, you know, because Adem Bona is playing in that dunker spot and is just going to get rebounds. And and kind of just be there for lob threats. And again, he's an athletic guy. He can block shots, all those things, the rim protection. So again, if you were watching this team, if you're a sicko like us who was watching it in February, March, and April when Adem Bona was starting every game, then maybe that's not a huge surprise to you that we think he's going to play a big role this year. But he's my pick to kind of maybe take another step. But yeah, Dominic Barlow, I think, is probably the number one answer for this, just because of his sort of out of nowhere. Because I agreed with you. I thought that Jabari Walker was the most likely guy to, with the open roster spot, have his two-way converted. And who knows, maybe something will happen where that still is the case, or maybe eventually 2 roster spots are available and they both get converted down the line. Who knows? But yeah, I think those are all great picks. So let's go to some predictions now. First of all, we were talking about this game specifically before we hopped on and went live. Let's start with this game specifically, and then we'll go to just kind of an overall season type prediction. But yeah, first game tonight, obviously some questions as far as on the Celtics side, who's available, who's not. But just what is your prediction tonight, and maybe what are you most curious within the scope of the game to see tonight, or the biggest matchup or something that's maybe unique to this game?
I think I'm going to go with the biggest scope, or the thing that I really want to pay attention to. The Boston Celtics in the past, before the last year, they didn't really do it, but they've had some success against Joel Embiid, with the Al Horford factor. And then, Al did a pretty good job on him. When we look at the Boston Celtics and you see the position that they gutted, it was basically the center position. They got rid of Kristaps Porzingis, and they let Al Horford walk in free agency. I don't think that right now the Boston Celtics can have anybody who can guard Joel Embiid if Joel Embiid is close to being the Joel Embiid that he was last year, right? So I feel like that is going to be the key to the game, what Joel is going to do, right? But when we talk big picture, talk about the game, I do think that the 76ers have an opportunity of stealing one tonight. And the reason being is because when we look at it, we're talking about Tyrese Maxey, a one-time All-Star. I think he'll make the All-Star team this year. I think he'll be at least set up in position to do it. And then you have Joel. Right now, who does the Boston have? A guy that, you really fear? That's Jaylen Brown, right? So my thing is, you got 2 and you got 1. And Jaylen is questionable, right? And then I'll also look at it. I know that they have Derek White. They have some other core players coming back. But, you got to implement Anthony Simons. You have a couple other new players that you're bringing in. And they're just like the 76ers in regards to trying to get people up to speed. So with that being said, I think that the combo of Embiid, Maxey, and then you have no one knows what to get from VJ Edgecombe. Kelly Oubre is a gritty guy who's been there for years. And then you have Quentin Grimes trying to get paid, right? I just feel like the 76ers, things are set up for them to get this victory tonight. I really believe that. Now, what do you think?
I agree, and I concur with a lot of what you said, but it's just going to be a fascinating matchup because it's 2 teams that are kind of, again, in this weird place where the Celtics are basically on a gap year after the Tatum injury, and the Sixers are trying to figure things out after a disastrous season last year. So this is going to be really interesting, and these teams play each other. We were looking at the schedule 3 times basically in the first 3 weeks of the season, so they're going to see a lot of each other moving forward. Now, before we go to, you sort of alluded to this at the very beginning when we started chatting, but where do you think this team ultimately lands, the Sixers, at the end of the season? The East is weak. We know that there's a lot of teams that either added some pieces, have injuries, haven't proven anything, have a new coach. There's just a lot happening. Where does this team end up? Are they a playoff team? Are they a top 6 team? Are they a play-in team? Where do you think this ends up?
Okay, I'm going to be a glass half full on this one, right? So I'm going to go under the assumption that Joel Embiid is going to be healthy for the playoffs, and he's going to show us something. I'm going to be under the assumption that Paul George, is going to look more closer to the Paul George he was 2 years ago as opposed to the one last year. Like, a little bit sliding closer to that. With that being said, I think that they'll probably get the 6th seed, right? I think that they'll get the 6th seed. because like you said, the East is weak, the East is wide open. But with that being said, I think that they'll have a tough time matching up with whoever that number 3 seed is, right? I think that that's when we're going to see that where the 76ers are weak in certain areas or young in certain areas, inexperienced, and that may come back to haunt them. But I do think that, like, let's face it, in the NBA, to say that you don't make the 6th seed nowadays or the 7th seed or a play-in tournament, it's hard to not do that. Like, you have to really be extremely bad or you're tanking. So I feel like the 76ers will bring things together and get the 6th seed.
I'm slightly less optimistic than you. I say they'll be the 7th seed, win that first play-in game to get to the playoffs, and then put a scare in whether it's the Knicks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Orlando Magic, Atlanta Hawks, whoever you want in there, but ultimately lose in the first round. But again, being a playoff team after last year, it would be a step in a positive direction.
Yeah,
so that's all the time we have for today. Keith's got a game to cover in Boston tonight, and we've got 81 more of those afterwards at least. So thank you all for joining Inquirer Live at Gameday Central. Head over to inquirer.com/Sixers Game Day for more coverage of tonight's Sixers opener against the Celtics and all throughout the season. Gameday Central is the destination for fans and reporters to connect before, during, and after the game. I'm your host, Gina Mizell, Sixers beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. We hope to see you all here again soon on the next Inquirer Live.